A neurologist explained to us one time, you know, if you look at her brain right now, every 4 seconds there's seizure activity going on in her brain. He said, think of a match and you're striking the match and it sparks and it sparks. He's like, that's every 4 seconds, that's what's happening.
It's one of the most mysterious and frightening diseases known to man, epilepsy.
You good? She's had about 12,000 seizures. She's, been thrown through glass tables, down steps, out of the shower. Katie? Kate? You all right? Okay. No, well, I thought you fell down and had a seizure. You just find yourself at any little noise, a door closing and everything, jumping up to see if she's having a seizure.
It could come any moment, any time of the day or night, any time of the week or month, and you have no idea when it's going to happen.
I remember being face down on a gurney as they were putting me into an ambulance, screaming for help.
You could be totally normal all the rest of the time, and then for this one very short period of time, you have this seizure which can be completely incapacitating.
Her seizures start with an intense sort of look and then a little smile. Maybe she'll look away, but a lot of times she'll just hold your stare. Like she's still trying to hold on from going into the hole.
So this is a disease which can affect anybody, any age, any race, any sex. Anyone can get this problem at any point in their life.
Hoping for a cure, a young mother takes a chance on a radical new surgery.
Patients who are going down this road are pioneers.
Before, be prepared to lower the head.
They're out there on the edge of certainty as they undertake these kinds of treatments.
Another patient tries a controversial drug.
I don't really care whether it's legal or not. We would have done whatever we had to do to get it.
She gets bursts of energy and then very tired again. Right? That's...
Families struggling with seizures.
So now she's having a tonic seizure.
And doctors fighting to help them.
These are just people whose seizures and epilepsy have defined their family's life. They are all so desperate to get to a better place.
Seized Inside the Mystery of Epilepsy is made possible in part by contributions from the Polner family and the Thorpe family.
Early on a September morning at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, a groundbreaking surgery is about to take place.
Can't do this without you.
Ouida Foster is going to have a miniature computer put inside her brain to try to stop her from having seizures. She has epilepsy.
Yes.
G! Yeah, there are 2 G's.
I would like to solve.
Go ahead.
Dharma and Greg.
There you go.
In 1998, Ouida was a senior in college, trying to win some money on Wheel of Fortune.
Wow, what a round for you. And here's Charlie with a prize.
The pad is a trip to the Cayman Islands, Ouida. We'll stay at the Beach Club Colony Hotel in Dallas.
I won a trip to the Cayman Islands, and so I took my boyfriend with me to the Cayman
first
Islands.
trip?
That was a big deal, yes.
Ouida and Brett were married 2 years later, and in the early years of their marriage, they traveled together all over the world. In May of 2006, they were living in China, and one night, everything changed.
About 3 in the morning, I felt a jerk in the bed. And I kind of rolled over and said, you know, what's going on? We were up high in a sky rise, and so there were a lot of city lights that could come in, so I could kind of see her. And she was very stiff. It wasn't flailing arms and flailing feet, it was just a lot of clenching and stiffness. You know, I sensed it was a seizure.
The first thing that I remember is looking out the window of our apartment and wondering why we were up in the middle of the night. And then there was the light of the emergency room, and I didn't really know why we were there.
Doctors at a Shanghai hospital did an EEG, which records brain waves, and it confirmed Brett's hunch. Ouida had had a serious seizure.
What I remember was the doctor coming in and being almost a little matter-of-fact about it and saying, well, you have something called epilepsy. Well, that's a big deal.
Ouida is one of 3 million Americans who have epilepsy. It affects more people than brain tumors, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and cerebral palsy combined. Epilepsy can be present from birth, but it can also strike without warning at any age.
I see 30-year-olds come in saying, how could this happen? I'm healthy, I'm 30 years old, I didn't hit my head, my MRI is normal, how did this happen? And the answer is it does. We often don't understand it, but it can affect anyone.
1 out of every 26 Americans will develop epilepsy in their lifetime. The majority of them can control their seizures with medications. But for almost 1/3 of all patients, epilepsy is uncontrollable, unremitting, and all-consuming. And it's a profound mystery, striking the most complex and powerful organ in the body, the brain.
Our brain controls who we are. It controls how we think, how we behave, and our personality. 50 to 100 billion brain cells and trillions of connections.
Anything that disrupts the normal balance of function in the brain can lead to seizures.
The outward signs of seizures are part of the mystery of epilepsy. They can be anything from full-body convulsions to a bewildering range of other symptoms.
A patient gets a sense of something unusual, a visual disturbance that objects seem to look small and far away or large and up close, sparkling lights, things looking twisted or upside down or discolored in some funny and usually very stereotypical way.
Sometimes people feel like a rising sensation. Sometimes they feel as if they're floating. Sometimes they hear noises or they hear music. Sometimes they see things or see people.
Consciousness may become impaired, so the patient may be unable to respond, may be unable to move out of the way of a car or something coming toward them.
Seizures can be very subtle. I could be having one right now, feeling a strange feeling in my belly, smelling burnt rubber, getting a feeling of déjà vu, and if I don't communicate to you that I'm experiencing this, you would have no idea.
Do you know where we are?
Ouida has what are called complex partial seizures.
Do you know where we are?
Right before it happens, she can feel the warning signs, a frightening rush of sensation called an aura.
Well, auras can be just a pit in the stomach, a squeeze in your chest, a feeling that someone's behind you and you don't know that they are, a feeling of falling that you don't know you're feeling.
Her seizures start with an intense sort of look and then a little smile and maybe a nod. And sometimes she'll fidget with her thumbs. Maybe she'll look away, but a lot of times she'll just hold your stare. Like she's still trying to hold on from going into the hole.
How you feeling?
Ouida doesn't lose consciousness, but she's frozen in time, unable to speak and not aware of her surroundings.
How you doing? How you doing?
What is?
How you feeling?
You can see the fright in her eyes as she's trying to make sense out of her environment. It's like that scariness behind the eyes is probably one of the saddest things to see.
The seizures can happen anywhere, anytime. It's especially frightening when Ouida's with her daughter, Ripley.
When she has an aura, it felt like something weird's going down your stomach like this. A few times. Then it stops, because that's kind of like a fire drill that says I sense smoke. There's a fire about to happen. So it's sort of like I sense a seizure's about to happen.
But sometimes the warning signs come too late, like one day when Ripley was 4.
I was in my office and I got a call from Wida, and she said, I'm at a train station and I don't have Ripley with me. Do you know where she is? And I said, no, she should be with you. And she said, oh, she's not.
Wida had had a seizure on the train while she was taking Ripley to summer camp. Dazed and confused, she got off at the next stop. She had no idea where she was, how much time had gone by, or where Ripley was.
And I remember what it felt like in my voice when I was trying to explain to him, and I was feeling a tear come down my cheek because I didn't know where our daughter was.
She was so disoriented that she didn't even know which direction she was traveling. And she couldn't remember if she'd already dropped Ripley off at camp, or if Ripley might still be on the train alone.
What if she got off with a stranger and was frantic looking for her mom?
After several panicked minutes, Brett was finally able to reach the camp. Wida had already dropped Ripley off. She was safe.
Thank God nothing's happened, because I don't know, you know. Nobody wants an accident to be on their watch.
Ever since her first seizure 9 years ago, Wida has taken powerful anti-epilepsy drugs. But nothing has ever stopped her seizures. So she's decided to take a bold step, to undergo a revolutionary brain surgery for epilepsy. It's a new technology called the NeuroPace, a smart device that will be implanted into Wida's brain and then programmed to recognize the signature brainwaves of her seizures. When it detects a seizure's about to happen, it will send imperceptible jolts of electricity directly into her brain to try to stop it. Wida is one of the earliest patients in the U.S. to take a chance on this new surgery.
Oh, to think about why we're doing this. So, what's up? Certainly scary.
I was just talking to myself.
But then you think, okay, what? I have tried everything else. What noses? And then I look at my daughter and my husband and I think, we've got to try. Because anything would be better than this.
Epilepsy has been called the sacred disease, a subject of fascination and a source of fear for all of recorded history. Early cultures almost universally viewed epilepsy as a form of possession. In the New Testament, Jesus cures a boy with seizures by casting out the demons believed to be tormenting him. And for centuries, epilepsy has carried a deep and abiding stigma.
It was used to help diagnose witches in the Middle Ages. So it's had this terrible connotation over time, and I think it's seen as this loss of control. It's something that unfortunately evokes fear in people.
Well into the 20th century, there were laws in the U.S. that forbid people with epilepsy to marry, and mandatory sterilization was legal in some states until 1974. This kind of discrimination meant that until very recently, epilepsy has remained in the shadows, both misunderstood and understudied.
We really don't understand what it really is when a seizure happens and how they affect people in so many different ways and how they're so difficult to control. It's sort of amazing what we don't know about seizures. It's much more than we do know.
What is known is that all seizures start with a burst of abnormal electricity in the brain.
During a seizure, the cells in the brain are actually communicating too much. There's too much electrical activity, and it exceeds this normal threshold of the way the brain cells should be communicating together.
Some seizures affect the entire brain at once, sending it into a frenzy of overactivity. Others start in one specific area, but can spread uncontrollably.
The way I conceive of seizures is that they are essentially a fire in the brain.
A brush fire can spread organically, going sort of down a road from one place to the next, or can jump over a ravine from one area of the brain to another that's far away. It's chaotic, it's intermittent, its behavior is unpredictable, its duration is unpredictable.
I could be with my children on a playground. I could potentially be driving a car and suddenly have a seizure and lose control. It can always be on the back of your mind.
It's like a sword of Damocles waiting to drop.
Epilepsy can be caused by injuries to the brain at birth, by certain genetic abnormalities, by trauma from a blow to the head, or by lasting damage after a stroke or infection. But for half of all patients, there is no obvious cause.
Right now, when we attempt to develop treatments for epilepsy, it's mostly a guessing game. So what we do now is we try drugs that, based on the little we know, we think may interfere with and block seizures or even prevent them. And sometimes that works, and sometimes that's fantastic. However, there are at least a third of epilepsy patients who do not respond at all to these drugs. And we really, to be honest, don't know why.
In Cortlandt Manor, New York, 2 hours north of Manhattan, one family is all too familiar with the failure of epilepsy medications.
Is Mom here?
Yeah, Mom's here. She's working from out of the house. You want to go back to sleep, or would you like to get up?
I don't know yet.
Caitlin Dunn is 26. She started having seizures when she was 18 months old.
I mean, I can't really take the reins off. You know, I'm just going to run down to the store for 5 minutes and I'll leave her here and I'll come back and furniture will be moved. I've come back to find her within a seizure.
Caitlin's had more than 12,000 seizures in her life. They are unpredictable and violent. They've sent her falling down the stairs, crashing into walls or furniture, thrown her out of the shower. She's ended up in the emergency room multiple times.
See, the problem is, Katie, is we can't predict when you're going to have a seizure. It happens when it happens. Remember the other day I came home and your sneaker rack was crushed?
I just walked in and saw it.
What happens, Katie, is that's how I can tell you had a seizure when I'm not here. When furniture's moved across the room.
I didn't move. I didn't do that.
You don't remember. That's the nature of your seizure disorder.
It wasn't a seizure.
Okay. I can't really let her go too far without checking on her. More than 5-10 minutes in the bathroom is a problem. And I've found her writhing around on the bathroom floor, thrown off the toilet. Katie? Kate? What? You all right? Yes. Okay. No, I thought you fell down and had a seizure. You know, I'll hear a noise. It might not be a seizure. It might not be Caitlin falling down and crashing through something, but a noise in the house, and I'm out of my skin. I jump out of my skin.
She will be.
I got you, Katie. I got you. I got you. Yeah. That's it, Katie. I got you. I got you. That's good. Kate. 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 Kate.
What?
You back with us? Hmm?
There are some days that Caitlin has seizures like this, over and over again.
What's happening? What's my name? Kate. What's my name? Kate? What? How you doing?
Caitlin can't work, she can't drive, she can't leave the house by herself. And every day she has to take massive doses of the most powerful anti-epilepsy drugs there are. Nothing has stopped her seizures. But every drug comes with side effects, which can be just as life-threatening as the seizures themselves.
So the first one I'm doing is Felbamate, and Felbamate, it's been off the market for years. It's a black label drug, and the worry is aplastic anemia. But it's the only drug that's ever been in any way effective for Caitlin, so we have to use it regardless. Caitlin always has the rarest reactions to everything, and I can go through the gambit of the drugs we've been on, and you'd be shocked what has happened to her. Every single one.
I had ended up in the hospital, and it was toxic. It went through all these medicines. None of them really worked.
Caitlin was running out of options. And then her family heard news reports about what sounded like a miracle in Colorado.
Now to a developing story. There is a medical marijuana plant that has parents moving to Colorado to help their kids.
It was the story of a little girl named Charlotte, who was having more than 300 seizures a week.
An last-ditch effort to help their suffering
Her
children.
parents decided to try a form of medical marijuana, which was legal in Colorado, an oil called cannabidiol, or CBD.
And after her first dose, she had a week without a single seizure. Those 300 seizures she did not have. And it's safe, and it has no side effects.
By thousands of families.
As Charlotte's story spread, hundreds of families flocked to Colorado, eager to try CBD for their children.
They've been contacted by thousands.
And the Dunns were ready to move there too.
When you're talking about these very severe cases, you have to go down the path that no one wants to go down. But now if there's a path with less side effects, how could you even expect a parent not to take it? I mean, I don't really care whether it's legal or not. I mean, we would have done whatever we had to do to get it, because you sit with my child for a week, you know, and you would be doing it.
But shortly before they were about to leave, they found out there might be another option, much closer to home. At the NYU Langone Epilepsy and Neurology Center, Oren Davinsky specializes in patients with uncontrollable seizures, and he'd come to believe that medical marijuana might help some of them.
These are just people whose seizures and epilepsy have defined their family's life. It makes you think this deserves being tested. We should do trials on this.
Davinsky decided to do a clinical trial of CBD, but right away he faced major hurdles. Because the oil is made from marijuana, it's what's known as a Schedule I narcotic, in the same class as heroin, and it's illegal under federal law. At the time, even medical marijuana was forbidden in New York. Getting permission for a study dragged on for months.
All right, girl.
But as word spread that CBD might be available in New York, hundreds of families applied to be in the trial.
Got her.
One patient on the waiting list is Lily Gilmore.
You're wild and crazy.
Lily is 13. Her seizures started when she was just 6 months old, with a devastating diagnosis from her pediatrician.
I can vividly remember that moment. She just said, like, your baby has, you know, one of the worst seizure syndromes, and, you know, we're going to do everything we can, but it's going to probably be a really hard road.
A neurologist explained to us one time, you know, if you look at her brain right now, every 4 seconds there's seizure activity going on in her brain. He said, think of a match, and you're striking the match, and it sparks and it sparks. He's like, that's every 4 seconds, that's what's happening. You don't see her having it, When you see her outwardly have a seizure, it's kind of like when you finally get the match to light and you see the flame.
What about this one?
That constant misfiring in her brain has left Lily profoundly disabled. She's never even been able to talk. She's tried one medication after the other, but none of them has stopped the seizures.
I think when she was younger, we just kept thinking, she's going to get better, the seizures are going to stop, maybe this next medication is going to work.
But it's relentless. It's the most difficult seizures to control.
Since 6 months old, she's had seizures every day, plus all the meds that she's been on. What does that do to a person's body? It's got to be a killer.
Like the Dunns, the Gilmores didn't know what else to try. And then they heard the same stories about the miracle drug in Colorado.
We knew that there was a lot of talk of CBD helping people with seizures, and certainly everything going on in Colorado. And it was such a great feeling to feel hopeful about something.
With all the necessary permits finally in place, deliveries of CBD started arriving at Divinsky's clinic. It's one of 11 sites across the country testing the oil, which has to be handled with unusually strict safeguards.
We need to have a safe that weighs at least 750 pounds and has a combination lock. And it has to have limited access to, only like 3 or 4 people.
But even more challenging than the security was picking the patients who would actually get to try CBD.
The selection for people in the trial was a challenge because so many people wanted this. It has been a totally unique experience in my career. We have done a lot of drug trials, and typically it's always an issue with recruiting patients. For this trial, I think I could have filled 50 people slots for every one slot that I had.
Divinsky could only accept 25 patients, but Lily Gilmore is one of them.
The wait was so long. It's like I woke up this morning, I'm like, wow, we're on our way. And it's nice to just be able to think maybe this might be something that might help her.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
All right, good to see you.
How's Miss Lily?
She's a little tired today.
Hey, pal.
She had a,
Good morning. It's like you're down for the count.
Yeah, she had a rough day
Rough
yesterday.
night. She certainly deserves a good shot at this, and
Yeah.
keep our fingers crossed she'll be. So Lily is one of our more impaired children, and her parents come from a distance in Pennsylvania to get here, really desperate to get to a better place. They are not expecting a perfect place or necessarily a seizure-free place, but I think a better place is hope, and I think it would be tremendous if this drug could offer that to them.
She gets bursts of energy and then very tired again.
That's why sometimes it happens, like she's bouncing up and down like that.
As they're waiting for her first dose, Lily has her 6th major seizure in 24 hours.
There she goes.
Oh, so now she's having a tonic seizure.
Their best hope to stop events like this one is the CBD oil.
We're going to open up. Can I see those eyes? Good morning. It's really hard to know what the chances are that Lily will respond to this new medication. We're very hopeful. I want her to respond, because if we don't find some effective therapy, Lily's life is sadly very limited in its quality of life and probably even her duration of life.
There you are. She's with us.
Hello.
I think this drug trial is right now the most promising option for her.
Walk normally. You don't have to walk one foot in front of the other.
It might also be the most promising option for Caitlin Dunn. She's another one of the first patients in the trial.
How you feeling today?
I'm just tired.
Just tired? Do you feel more tired, or?
This could be the answer, and we're just grateful to be in this study. Caitlin doesn't have any friends. She doesn't receive any phone calls. There's nobody that really knows she's in existence, because she's been so isolated.
One friend.
You have one friend. Oh, that's a whole nother story we'll have to talk about, but it would be a tremendous thing for her to be able to take a walk by herself somewhere. You know, go to be able to drop her off at the movies on her own or something, you know, anything, you know. If we don't have as many seizures, that maybe you're going to be able to have your own life one day, right?
I hope so.
We hope so, too.
If you can let go.
If he could just let go.
So, there should be 21 bottles in here.
Is that it?
That's all?
That's all. Take a look at the huge amount of oil that we're bringing, but they're coming up.
Hopefully, the next month when you come, we'll have the
Yeah, the
higher,
100,
which will, be 1/4 of this.
Yeah.
So.
This is going to work.
All right.
A lot of faith.
All right, so I'll see you in a month.
Okay.
All right, let's go, Kate.
Bye.
Bye, nice to meet you.
At Massachusetts General, Weta Foster is ready for her own chance at a life without seizures. The surgery to implant the neuropace in her brain is about to begin.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm all right.
You ready? This is gonna be like very straightforward.
In my perspective, it's still neurosurgery.
When you implant these devices, it's a big deal. The patient goes to the operating room, they need anesthesia, they're at risks of all sorts of surgical complications, infections, bleeding, things of this nature.
Okay, so I want you to take some really nice, big, deep breath all the way in and out.
Patients who are going down this road early, as Weta is, are pioneers, they're explorers. They're out there on the edge of certainty as they undertake these kinds of treatments. It's a measure of the seriousness of the disease that people are willing to go there.
There were months of planning before the operation. The first step was to figure out exactly where in Weta's brain the seizures start.
Can I have your autograph?
She came to a special monitoring unit in the hospital where electrodes recorded her brain waves. Then the doctors stopped all her medications to deliberately provoke seizures like this one.
Can I just suction? Yeah. It's okay.
For a full week, the team analyzed every seizure, and this gave them a critical piece of information.
Yeah.
Her seizures start on the left side of a structure deep inside her brain called the hippocampus. After a few seconds, they spread across to the right side, and then both sides are overwhelmed. This pattern makes the surgery more complicated. They'll need 2 separate electrodes, one in each side of the hippocampus. And they have to thread them into place through 2 small incisions with no direct view of Weta's brain.
We need extreme precision in this surgery. We need to make sure that the electrodes end up in exactly the right place. And I can't see it as I'm putting it in because I'm only putting it in through a tiny hole. I don't think it's quite past the donut yet, so there we go. So the first thing we did was put a frame on her head, and basically I'm creating landmarks. No, we're just gonna have to kind of hold it like that. And the frame itself has dimensions on it, X, Y, and Z dimensions. So everything within that volume of space has a number. Before you tighten it too, just stop right there because we need a little slack, so.
Once the frame is in place, they do a CT scan. The images display Weta's head in relationship to the frame.
So I want to make sure we include all these bars because that's our reference.
The CT images are merged with an earlier MRI, which shows the structures inside her brain. Together, the coordinates from the CT scan and the detail from the MRI allow them to figure out the best trajectory for the electrodes.
A lateral minus 22.4 and a vertical of 15.8.
Their path through her brain has to get them to their target, but also avoid damaging other critical areas.
The main thing I'm worried about in her case are the occipital cortex, which mediates her vision. You know, obviously we have to go through some part of the brain, but I want to minimize an obvious problem. So if we go right through her visual cortex, she might have like a blind spot or a part of her vision that's impaired. Do the reality check. All right, could I have the eye drape, please? As before, wide chain tidal CO2, be prepared to lower the head. All right, here we go.
Finally, they're ready to drill the 2 tiny holes for the electrodes.
Okay.
For wax, please?
So this is the end that goes into the brain, and then this end goes into the device.
They'll be threaded, one at a time, into Ouida's brain.
That's probably the riskiest moment because I'm passing about a 9-centimeter, electrode through a tiny hole, through it's a long pass through the brain, and I can't see what it's going through. So if anything bad's going to happen, that's when it's going to happen, is when I'm doing that pass. Okay, good. So second electrode's in.
It's taken more than 3 hours to get to this point, and there's still a long way to go.
So we've put both electrodes in. We're just going to check an X-ray, see if everything looks okay. This is exactly where the hippocampus is, so it looks great. Yeah. All right, so I think we're ready for... Put it up on the screen for you.
The electrodes are in place. The next step is to attach them to the smart device that will detect Ouida's seizures.
And this is the actual device. That's the thing that does the recording and the stimulation. CO2's okay?
Okay.
You have that little screwdriver?
And then, the most crucial moment arrives. It's time to test the neuropace.
Yeah, let's run it.
Let's see brain.
Let's see some EEG. Ta-da! That's awesome.
Left, right.
So this is real-time EEG. That's recording from her brain and then transmitting telemetrically, wirelessly, out to this wand and then to the computer. There's a spike. See this big spike right here? That's a spike. So that's the kind of thing that is associated with seizures here.
From now on, when the device detects those brain spikes, it will send targeted jolts of electricity into Ouida's brain to try to stop her seizures.
Look at those spikes. That's amazing, huh?
It's a really exciting moment because it feels like we're on the verge of entirely new ways to deal with this problem.
We're all finished. Open your eyes. It's Dr. Eskandar. All right, it's all done. You made it.
And maybe there's really hope now that we could do something much better for our patients than we've been able to do before.
Even as doctors and patients push the frontiers of treatment forward, a fundamental mystery remains unsolved. What causes epilepsy in the first place?
In epilepsy, we refer to this as epileptogenesis. What is it that causes a brain to have a seizure and to basically learn to seize?
That was the question for Andy Ford. About 2 years ago, without any warning, he had a massive seizure. He woke up handcuffed to a gurney in the hospital with no idea what had happened. He was shocked when his girlfriend told him he'd been violent.
When the paramedics got there, I was fighting them off, and they called the sheriff and the police department. And I would say it's pretty embarrassing, but I slightly remember being face down on a gurney screaming for help as they were putting me into an ambulance. But other than that, I don't remember what happened.
Andy thought this was a one-time event, but 2 months later, it happened again.
It was after my second seizures when they told me that I had epilepsy.
There seemed to be no explanation why Andy's brain had started seizing, except for one incident when he was in the army in Afghanistan. In November 2010, he was on a mission to gather intelligence in an area controlled by the Taliban on the side of a mountain.
We had stopped in the road because a part of the road was blown out. 3 of our guys went up to the ridge line to make sure no one was waiting with a command wire to blow us up. One of my friends shot 2 Taliban that were sitting waiting to ambush us, and we got out of our vehicles to set up security, and on that ridge line, just out of nowhere, I was blown up by a RPG.
A rocket-propelled grenade blew Andy into the air and threw him down the mountain.
It was definitely the cliche of your life flashing before your eyes. It felt like I was gonna die.
Andy survived a serious leg injury, and at the end of his tour, he came home with a Purple Heart. He had no idea that, like generations of veterans before him, he was also at risk for another invisible wound. As far back as World War II, it's been known that about half of all soldiers who suffer head wounds in combat will go on to develop epilepsy. The more serious the injury, the higher the risk. Penetrating brain wounds, like gunshots, are the most likely to damage the brain and cause seizures. But hundreds of thousands of veterans who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan are coming home with a new and different kind of damage to their brains. And it's damage they often don't even know they have. Traumatic brain injury from explosions and blasts.
Traumatic brain injury in Iraq and Afghanistan is referred to as the signature injury of those wars because of the use of blast. The blast itself, if you're close enough to a blast, the blast wave is traumatic to the brain and it can disrupt brain tissue. You can be thrown from the blast and you can hit your head. You can be in a car that's thrown and the car rolls over, and you can have a traumatic brain injury that way. Okay, let's start, as always, with your eyes. So just...
Andy's kind of epilepsy is called post-traumatic epilepsy. It's completely unpredictable and can start months or even years after the original injury.
Now close your eyes, leave your hands up, touch this finger to your nose, bring it back out. Great. So when we're looking at somebody who's had traumatic brain injury, we can't tell them when this will start. We can't tell them when it will stop. And we can't tell them why they got it and the buddy next to them didn't get it.
The first clues for Andy came long before his violent seizures. And they were so subtle, he didn't have any idea what they were.
I'll have a slight nauseated feeling where it comes to my throat, and then there'll be a smell. It's almost like a cold gasoline smell. Can't breathe, it feels like I can't breathe.
It turned out that these strange sensations were actually small seizures, called focal seizures. It's not known exactly why these subtle seizures start after soldiers are exposed to blasts. But one theory is that as the brain works to repair itself, sometimes the process spins out of control and ends up causing seizures.
One of the things that happens is the brain is trying to remodel after that injury. And it could be that that attempt to remodel connections is actually what leads to abnormal connections that later can exhibit as epilepsy.
For now, Andy takes medication to control his seizures, and he's doing well. He wants to go back to school and find a new job. And while thousands of veterans like him return to civilian life, they might offer a unique opportunity to find answers to fundamental questions about epilepsy.
I'd love to see us be able to say, oh, yeah, you have epilepsy, and this is why you have it, and this is what we have to do to get rid of it.
$14 times?
6 months into the CBD trial, there's good news for Caitlin Dunn.
We saw immediate results,
Yeah. The typical seizure is now 5 or 8 seconds.
whereas 80% of her seizures, her
Used
monthly
to be.
seizures before, were 20 seconds and more, 20 to
30
45
seconds,
seconds,
45
30
seconds.
Right. Hard seizures.
Hard seizures.
You know? Yes, you're already on the medical marijuana. The only one in the family that can do it legally.
Caitlin's seizures are not only shorter, they're less intense and less frequent. And for the first time in her life, Jack and Kathy can imagine a brighter future.
I want her to just have a chance to have all those firsts. I mean, think of all the firsts that Caitlin hasn't even had yet.
Date.
I want her to have all those
Phone call
firsts,
from
those
somebody.
feelings, that excitement, the phone rings, the being sad, being happy, being mad, you know. I just want her to have all the spontaneity that's in life.
The early trial results are encouraging across the board. More than half of the patients taking CBD have had a significant reduction in seizures, and some of them are completely seizure-free.
There is a chance that this really could be a breakthrough therapy for people with epilepsy. We don't know that yet, and we won't know it until randomized trials are done. But I do feel like for one of the few times in my career that we're at this point at which something incredible could be here.
But things are not going well for Lily Gilmore. She started having clusters of seizures, one after the other.
She'll get red in the face, or she has just an awful pain look on her face. And that's will go on every like 3 to 10 minutes.
The medications John and Natalie had at home didn't stop the clusters. Lily had to be hospitalized to try a more powerful combination.
It's constantly a roller coaster. I feel like it's just like up and down, and you sort of don't ever know what to expect, and we're constantly trying to get ahead of the seizures.
So this is Lily, day 2.
Lily needed such high doses of drugs that it threatened her breathing.
This is day 14 in the hospital.
She couldn't move. She couldn't eat. John and Natalie stayed at her side day and night.
Still has not really done any movement.
Sorry, it's pretty bad. You know, it gets old seeing. Sorry. It gets old seeing her suffer like this all the time.
After 5 long weeks, Lily finally pulled through the crisis. But it had become clear that the CBD oil was not doing her much good.
This medicine has not been, you know, the miracle that we were certainly hoping that it was going to be. It's not a cure for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that's how it was coming out. Like, hey, it's going to help everybody. It's not the case.
Hi, it's Lily Gilmore.
All right, thank you.
There are 4 months left in the trial, and John and Natalie are facing a hard decision: whether it's worth it to keep Lily in the study any longer.
Hi, Lily.
Back me up, Lily.
One question for you guys is just with the big picture of CBD, here we are, she's obviously been in the hospital a few times. And
First, after the first 2 months, we did see something.
Right. And that happens with a lot of drugs, not just CBD, with a lot of medications, you get a honeymoon period.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, and this is always
Difficult.
a problem of a kid with such difficult epilepsy to begin with.
I know. I wish it had been more clear-cut.
It's a CBD.
They decide to keep Lily on CBD at least until the end of the trial.
Okay.
All right, Lily? Okay, thank you.
very much.
Then they'll start the search for something to help her all over again.
Okay.
We'll see in a month.
Maybe it's not, completely all that we wanted it to be, or, the magic cure for Lily, but they've gathered a lot of information from Lily that will help lots and lots of kids and young adults suffering, these severe seizure syndromes that no other treatments seem to help with. And that's a good thing.
In labs across the country, scientists are searching for new ways to understand, treat, and maybe even prevent epilepsy. But progress has been frustratingly slow.
You know, we see this problem that's affecting so many people in so many different ways that we have only a small number of sort of weapons against, and any of us who are in this understand that we got to be coming up with new ways to understand it and new ways to control it.
The President of the United States, Barack Obama.
A massive effort to jumpstart brain research got underway when the National Institutes of Health developed a multi-million-dollar project called the Brain Initiative.
You know, as humans, we can identify galaxies light years away. We can study particles smaller than an atom, but we still haven't unlocked the mystery of the 3 pounds of matter that sits between our ears.
Unlocking that mystery, the fundamental workings of the normal human brain, could then be the backdrop for figuring out what goes wrong in brain diseases, including epilepsy.
The Brain Initiative can enable different types of studies in epilepsy that have ever been undertaken before. They might include things like an atlas of all of the different cell types within the brain and new genetic causes of epilepsy, and many other resources to help brain scientists begin to ask different kinds of questions.
The answers to those questions could lead to entirely new ways to stop seizures.
The biggest changes will be much safer drugs, will be much more effective drugs, will be much more rational and evidence-based modalities to treat patients. We won't be using our guts and our instincts to treat people.
Of course, the dream is, and I think we'll achieve this dream, that we'll be able to prevent epilepsy from happening in the first place. That's the ultimate goal.
Boring. Why are you smacking me? Who told you that? Did your
It's been 6 months since Ouida's surgery, and she's been watching and waiting, hoping the NeuroPace would make a difference. By the time the family went on vacation in the early spring, she had a significant reduction in seizures.
We saw it go down probably by about 50%, and that happened 2 months in a row, so we're very excited about that.
We were giddy. I was giddy. I was excited about its prospects.
But as time went on, her seizures seemed to be coming back.
We have a development of the seizures coming in pairs now, where I might have one, and then about 36 hours later, 48 hours later, I'll have another one, and then there'll be a week, and then that'll happen again.
Which is a little bit disheartening. It's a little bit of the similar cycles we had with some of the medicines, where we'd have a bit of a honeymoon period. And so I think we're hoping that that's not going to be a repeat.
The NeuroPace is such new technology that it's impossible to predict what Ouida's ultimate outcome will be. She could still get better, but it's going to take more time.
I'm committed to this being a longer process and a journey. All of us want to be seizure-free. That's a golden ticket we all want.
Yes, madam. How would you like?
Doesn't matter how bad your epilepsy is, what kind of seizures you have, what age you are. An improvement would be great, but you really go through all of this because you want it to be cured.